And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And this is Dan, your host and MC. And we're here with Serge. And we're going to be getting ready to do some deep trance channeling with Kris. So if you're new to us, welcome to the channel. You're about to get a fresh dose of some wisdom and really interesting conversation that we're going to have here with Kris here shortly. So I hope you'll stay with us. And if you're back, I'm glad that you're here with us again. We've just been having some fantastic conversations. That last episode was really deep, really interesting. We got into, talked a little bit about dementia and why that may be. And there's lots of different dimensions of it. And Kris really took a lot of angles. So it's going to be an interesting one. I'll see. I get a sense he's going to build on it. So we'll see where we go from there. But
Hmm.
Serge, any thoughts from you?
Not any particular thoughts, because I'm not privy to what he talked about. But I know I do feel the flow of it, and it's almost like he tried to approach it from several angles all at once and
Yeah,
try to
that's
give a
fair.
picture of that. So, anyways, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty nice summary of the approach. So thanks, Serge.
Now then, once again, we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks, Kris.
And in trusting that you are comfortable, let us build on the previous discussion. Now, it is certainly a more common approach and perhaps one that fits in a little better with some of the preconceived notions or narratives or lenses or so on, that somehow or other an individual is a victim of the system, medical or otherwise, that a person may be the victim of a malady. A person may be the victim of their own body and own immune system turning against them, perhaps because of some food they ate, or this or that situation, their environment, and so on. An environment could be physical environment, could be psychological, the way they grew up, and whatever. Regardless of what the contention is, one thing is and should be absolutely certain. The individual, the person, may choose to not be aware of their awareness, may choose to not be aware of certain choices that they make behind the scenes because it is more convenient. And of course, we don't mean that someone sit at their kitchen table and say, well, in 2 weeks from now, I'm going to have an accident and break a leg. No one does that. But they may have specific reasons. They may need a course correction, a big change in their lives, and perhaps in accordance with all of the particular belief systems that they hold and entertain, in some respects, perhaps having a broken leg might prove advantageous. It might provide the means to this and that outcome, which might not be otherwise considered viable. Just like, for instance, you may need a particular break from work. You find the situation getting stressful, workload is increasing, not enough time to think, and so on and so forth. Subconsciously, you might think, I know I will come down with a cold. And it may be blamed on stress. Inadvertently, it is. But the idea that you may not be able to allow to give to yourself the break you need, you will find a way for it to happen nonetheless. So some people may seemingly come down with a malady, may come down with some serious illness, And there are many, many people who may, for instance, develop cancer and so on and so forth, all autoimmune to one degree or another. And they may recognize after some time that this has given them an opportunity to completely change their mind, to completely transform their attitudes and expectations. Perhaps there were people in their lives that they simply could not ever forgive for some transgression or another, perhaps a family situation that they were growing up with. Now they're at a point in their life where they realize, why did I carry this grudge, this pain, perhaps for decades? They let it go. Lo and behold, they might not even make the association, but lo and behold, something starts to change and they apparently get better. Their situation improves. This is not uncommon. It occurs. And they may suddenly realize, too, that the person that they were or they became was because they thought this is what others wanted them to be, but they never allowed themselves to be themselves. They always considered the needs of others first and not theirs. Now they are at a crossroads. Their needs are the most important because they have this or that situation going on. Changes the whole dynamics. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, and I had a recent experience that was pretty similar. Um, I, I had a kind of a illness with fever and yeah, just kind of general cold. But at the end of it, I had noticed that particular emotions, guilt and shame that I had felt kind of in my chest area for I'd say decades. And I got to the end of that particular illness, and for about 4 or 5 days, and it really it was gone. So it's really remarkable. It can kind of seeing it as a release mechanism almost.
It can, indeed, especially if you allow yourself, if the person allows themselves to trust their bodies, because it has deep innate wisdom at the cellular level, and it is all psychological and emotional. The issues themselves, unresolved emotions, may seem to trigger autoimmune responses that seem to go haywire. There are many cases where individuals recognize this very thing and they manage to be able to let go of emotions that they buried within themselves for decades. The difficulty is that you may think you lock the emotions away in a chest buried deep in the subconscious, but what you have actually done is buried a part of yourself in that chest deep in your subconscious. At one point or another, it starts to bang on the lid of that chest and demand attention and demand to be released. And the more you fight, the worse you get. The more you allow, the better you get. Do you follow? So, in other words, by burying emotions deep in the subconscious, you actually become the prisoner. You become the prisoner because you may think out of sight, out of mind, but it doesn't work that way. Out of sight, out of mind means more attention will be required, more energy will be required to keep the damn thing suppressed. And you live a lie. You live a false state because you locked away a vital part of yourself, one that you do not want to deal with. We've talked about something similar in the past. It is a survival mechanism, but in the long run, it is also a death strategy.
Well, Kris, and it seems our beliefs or the filters that we are using to approach that situation would influence the outcome. For instance, somebody viewing that same thing as a disease or a dysfunction or an illness is going to have a very different outcome from somebody that says, this is the wisdom of my body and something is adjusting or something of that effect. It would change
Correct.
the outcome.
It is not a disease, it is a symptom that you have ignored certain emotions for a very long time. And it has built up momentum and requires your acquiescence to release the situation and to heal. The healing itself may be difficult, but the end game of the healing is very important. And that is why, if you do suppress emotions, you can guarantee yourself that at some point, that emotion or those emotions will begin to erupt and cause a little emotional volcano. And it will require far more energy to clean up afterwards than if you used a simple approach that you recognize that your enemy is not your emotion. You have no enemies, except perhaps your own self. That is where your autoimmune system recognizes that there is an invader. There's a set of energies and set of emotional energies that are no longer in sync with the general consensus of the body, consciousness. It is causing a disruption. It is occupying the territory, say, unlawfully. It is there, but it is causing a disturbance. So therefore, the body is going to react because it does stand for its own integrity. That is very, very important. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, yeah, I follow.
Would you care to add something to that?
So it's more of a question. Say we've got a viewer and they are looking at these things, it's looking as a disease and not, a symptom of something, or that process. How does one move from that mindset to
Mm,
realizing maybe the deeper insights into what causes, or
indeed.
why this
So
happens?
there is much talk nowadays about emotional intelligence, but often it falls short of its moniker. Emotional intelligence means that your emotions are there because there is an intelligence behind the scenes that wants you, that needs you to put it in proper context. And of course, saying a few little affirmations is not going to cut it. It needs a bit more introspection, especially recognizing that guilt and shame and judgment, especially towards yourself. And one may think that you are judging others, but in truth, you're judging yourself. There is no one else to judge but yourself. There is no one but you. So once you can recognize these little things, act in accordance with the mindset that there is a deep-seated intelligence that abides in every cell in your body consciousness and in your consciousness. You're working together. not against each other. You have worked against your body. Your body never works against you unless you force it to draw attention. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So aligning these two is not very, very difficult, but you may have to overcome some of your own biases. Once you do that, come to the realization that you can tap into the body's vast reserves of innate wisdom, and that wisdom lives in a state of grace and love. And most human beings, especially those who have a deep religious indoctrination, and we use the word specifically because religious indoctrination says, no, you should be ashamed, you are full of guilt and sin, and the only worth you have is to prove to some imaginary deity that you are worthy, and it should be the other way around. The deity should prove that it is worthy of human beings. And we have no hesitation in making that kind of a claim. So you work with the notion that anything that smacks of guilt, shame, and sin from any kind of indoctrination that you have accepted as a truth, you can put in the wastebasket. Put it aside. Peel those layers, those koshas, peel those layers like you peel an onion to reveal that the true self of what you are is not mired in the stain of sin and guilt and shame and judgment. That you are a being that is not only filled with, but overflowing with a state of grace and love. In other words, be in love. You don't have to have a person to be in love. Just be in love. And your health will make a dramatic shift. So the basic watering down of all of this is be in love. And we're not talking about puppy love or you love your car, you love your house, you love your wife. Be in love. Let the flow of that energy, which is the basic molecular construct of idea universe. The universe is idea construction. It is constructed out of love because you created the universe, your universe, because you have a sense of deep love that you may never experience because you were convinced that you were full of guilt and shame. So put those notions aside. But you are the only one who can do that. No aliens will come and save you from that. No priest, no God or divinity of any kind. You are the divinity of your life. So that is where it all starts. And that all occurs in your mind. As we said at the very beginning, everything is in the mind. And this is knowledge that has been around for thousands of years in various forms, in various formats, in various configurations. It is there. So be in love. Be love. And it is not good enough to just think that you are. Act it as well. Complete the circle. Be in love and act that part. The system that human beings have created is done in such a way that humans have categorized everything. The whites, the blacks, the yellows, the poor, the rich, the this and the that. This is all artificial construct. You do not see any part of your body, say your liver tell your heart, ah, what do you think you're doing? You're just pumping liquids. I have to detox everything. And the other part of the body, say the bladder, I have to empty everything. You should all be ashamed of yourself. Look at all the work I'm doing. There's no one part of the body that does that to any other part of the body. They all work in unison up to the point where you start interfering with your emotions. And you learn that very early in your life because this is what you all grow up in. But there will come a time when human beings can dispense with that kind of mindset, but you are not quite ready yet.
Well, Kris, it is interesting. There is one condition where one part of the body will say, "I'm going to take everything," or "I'm going to." It's cancer. That's physiologically kind of what cancer is.
Because there is a part of the individual's mind that needs a special condition. And the cancer itself actually can be because everyone has cancer. You all have cancer cells. For most individuals, it is benign. It is not active. The body is in a certain state of balance. But when you start messing up with guilt, shame, and other such emotions towards your own self, fear and worry, you throw the body's own carefully balanced ecological systems into disarray. And that is all triggered what goes on in your mind. And of course, the mind is not in your brain. It is a misconception. You live in your mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow that.
In fact, if you look at your environment, your room, your puppy, everything else, these are just manifestations of the energies in your mind. Your entire universe is the results of mental perceptions.
Yes, well, you might be catching that my puppy mind then wants to play.
Well, indeed, it is a sweet creature. Now, perhaps it is time to retire for the evening, unless you had one other question or comment.
No, not right now. I think these are going to be some really great episodes that connect with our viewers. So thanks so much,
Hmm.
Kris.
The main thing from this is that your health is dependent upon your state of mind, your emotional state of mind. And it helps if you have good, sustainable foods. But everything depends on what goes on in here. So remember that next time you think. And if you find yourself doubting and then having to think about it, know then that you are. And know then that perhaps you're using more than 10% of your brain.
Well,
And
I'm
with
going for
that,
at least
we
50%. So
indeed, then we thank you for your consideration and we return Joseph to you.
thanks so much, Kris. Appreciate it.